And welcome back to Sullivan's Backstage Pass. I'm here with Alan. Alan, do you prefer Al or Alan?
Alan.
Okay. So my first introduction to you was at the Sal show, uh Salgado show.
Yeah.
Um and the thing that stood out to me the most was as you were playing, I could tell that you were purposely holding back because that's what the performance required.
Interesting.
And there were points where you had opportunities to do sort of like your own soloing and sort of enhancing, and then you could catch a glimpse. And then after that, I sort of went back and looked at your work, and I just absolutely adore the way you play.
Well, thank you very
Like
much.
you're so it's a beautiful combination of technique and passion.
Wow.
You know what I
Thank you
mean?
very much.
Yeah. So how did you get started in music?
Yeah, that's the $1 billion question. Yeah. Well, my first memory of being attracted to music was when I was 5. And my dad, who was a self-taught, although I hate that term, I don't really believe in it. He was a self-taught piano player and cornet player. And are you familiar with cornet?
Yeah.
Some people are, some people are not.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I was forced to be in band, but that's a story for
Oh yeah,
time.
cool. Well, we'll hear that story shortly. Yeah. And the sad part really is I never heard him play either instrument. My dad was killed when I was 7. He was a lineman for Pacific Power and Light. He was killed on the job. That's another story. But he listened to music a lot. We had a really cool tube stereo. He had a really cool tube stereo, which was pretty rare in those days. And on Saturday mornings when my mom would be sleeping, that was her day to sleep in. My dad literally would crank this Magnavox stereo all the way to 10, and it had some oomph. And we would listen to music together. And we'd lay down right in front of one of the speakers, and he would put his right arm around me. And he would describe what was going on musically. He would go, "Here, you hear that? Those are the trumpets, and here come the trombones here." And he liked all sorts of different music. And so he would just point out what was going on. And so I remember those times with my dad were like incredibly important to me. And of course, then when we lost him just a few years later, those feelings, that feeling, however you want to describe it, of course, hung with me. And, of course, then the Beatles came out. And prior to that, I remember kind of liking the violin, but for some reason, my dad didn't think violin was the way to go. But the Beatles came out, electric guitar, and I was like, wow, cool. And so I was like instantaneously enthralled. We used to make cardboard electric guitars, the whole thing. And I was listening to music incessantly, so much so that my brother and I shared a room. But at that point, she was like, "Oh man, you're driving your brother crazy." So I got my own room so I could crank up my little stereo. And I wanted to play guitar when I was 9. But we went up to the local music store. I grew up out in Park Rose, actually, not very far from here. So we went up to Gateway Music, and we walked in on my 9th birthday. And I'd been wanting to play guitar for a while already. My mother was very excited, didn't know what she was getting into. And the sales guy said, "Nope, he's too little." And he said this, "He'll never play guitar." Those are his exact words. And then he said to my mom, he said, "Bring him back next year on his birthday and we'll see." Well, I was heartbroken. I mean,
Understandably so.
I was crushed, and my mother was very unhappy, but she didn't know. So she believed this guy who I'd like to call an idiot, but we went back on my 10th birthday. Same guy said the same thing, inclusive of he'll never play guitar. Well, my mom said, "Sorry." So off the wall came the $59.99 Sovereign Harmony Sovereign guitar, and it was mine. And included with the deal was 7 half-hour lessons. And the guy who taught me, and of course I don't remember his name, was a very nice guy, was not a very good teacher, and was not a very good guitar player. On my 4th lesson, at the end of the lesson, he said, "Stay here for a minute. I'm going to go get your mother and the salesman." And I thought I was in trouble. And so out he goes, and I'm like, what did I do? And here comes my mom, and now my mom's looking at me like, what'd you do? What'd you do? And the sales guy who had said he'll never play. And he said, go ahead and play, Alan, my teacher said to me. So I just played I don't remember what the hell it was. And the salesman, of course, was somewhat shocked, and he said, he plays better than I do now. This is his 4th lesson. And my mother, of course, was totally proud. And after that, my lessons were over. In fact, I never went back for lesson 5, 6, and 7. He just said, you should just learn on your own, which is exactly what I did. So it was, the days of LP records, dropping the needle and trying to imitate it. Yeah.
How cool is that, though? Like, to go back to your bully as a child and outplay him. And because it's like, not only is that like vindication in a way, it's also an opportunity for this person to never do that to somebody else again. Because
Yeah.
to deny a child music, regardless of if you think he plays or not,
Yep.
Not cool, bro.
No.
Not cool.
Yeah, the word I like to use for things like that, and some people are not comfortable with this word, but those are unforgivable things as far as I'm concerned.
100%.
I didn't see it as any sort of indication or anything. I was just doing what I thought was cool and what I loved. I get your point, though, but your second point, the one we were just referring to, yeah, for him to have the whatever, ignorance, idiocy, whatever you want to call it, to be, first off, he's losing a sale, number one.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that guy learned a lesson. I would love to think that's the case. I have no idea. But my teacher, I remember, was so proud of that moment, because I think he thought the guy was kind of, not being smart anyway. So it was a good way for the teacher silently to make a point. Yeah.
And then as you're learning and you're sort of picking up guitar, what was the first kind of music that you started like playing along with?
Yeah.
Sort of get your fundamentals.
Yeah, this, of course, is the days of AM radio. Like FM wasn't even happening yet. And of course, like I said, LPs. And at that point, basically, I owned Beatles records, and so, and then listened to AM record. And so I would just try with my ears to learn what was going on, like dropping the needle, as I already mentioned, and just trying to imitate stuff. So it was pop music, generally. And then it was just a few years later, so that would have been like 4th grade. Yeah, 4th grade. Had my first band in 4th grade.
Do you remember the name?
Oh, yeah, I do, because it's ridiculous. And it wasn't my idea, but you are probably way too young to remember a television show called Hogan's Heroes.
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay, so the name of the band was Hager's Heroes. And again, it was not my idea, but that's what we went by. And we only played a few gigs. We played like private little parties, and I remember we played for my school and stuff like that. And then as I got better and as I got a little bit older, I was always in bands from that point on, and usually playing with guys that were a little bit older than me, which was cool because, as we all know, old people know more than young people. So I was playing with people who were, if not better than me, they were good. And so it was a real challenge. Yeah. So, and then it was by about 7th grade, so 13 or so, yeah, I started hearing, I still love the Beatles. Everybody loved the Beatles then, but then Cream was out with Eric Clapton and Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker, and the album that they recorded that completely blew my mind was Disraeli Gears. And on that, of course, that was Sunshine of Your Love album, right? And that was a gigantic hit. But on that recording was a song called Outside Woman Blues. And on the liner notes, it said Blind Joe Reynolds. And I thought this was hilarious. I thought they were being facetious until one day, not very much longer. I remember I was with Terry. Rob Terry and I grew up out in Park Rose together. And in those days, Terry was always in my band. But we went to Music Millennium and they had a blues section. And I walked over to the blues section and I'm looking through a bunch of compilations. And one of the compilations was Delta Blues stuff. And so I'm looking through, I turned the album over when you could read liner notes easily, and it said Outside Woman Blues by Blind Joe by Blind Joe Reynolds. And I'm like, whoa, it's not a joke. And so I bought it and I dropped the needle on that and it's a piece playing on lap slide he's playing. And I'm like, wow, man, I get it. And then it was just a natural progression for me after that to start to go, oh, well, who did he listen to? And then I read about guys like Sunhouse and Charlie Patton and Willie Brown and Tommy Johnson. And I became a complete blues nerd. The earliest stuff, the Delta stuff, was the stuff that drew me in. So it's interesting you talk about, the passion and the feel or whatever that you mentioned, because I mean, that music is just as powerful as it gets, So
Oh,
there
yeah.
you go.
And it's one of those fascinating things. Like, I really didn't have a relationship with the blues until fairly recently.
Uh-huh.
I was pretty much into sort of like that prog rock, sort of heavy metal
Mm-hmm.
sort of music. And then when I stumbled across the blues, it filled in a lot of gaps that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
Because just how many of modern music today is built on that foundation
Yeah.
of blues and soulful music.
Oh, yeah.
So, do you remember the first time you got on stage as a professional musician?
Yeah, so as soon as you say professional, that means you're making money.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do. Like I said, we played a bunch of parties and also school events. Like schools would have live music at their homecoming dance and stuff like that. So out in Park Rose, I remember playing at their homecoming dance several times and other things like that. So usually it was school related because we were really too young to be out playing in bars, although that changed fairly early. Like by 17 and 18, we were actually playing gigs where people were drinking. But yeah, so making a few bucks from playing music. So yeah, those were my first professional musician gigs.
And then thinking about the live performance piece in general,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that gets you up on stage every
Yeah.
time? What is it about that live performance
Yeah.
that drives you?
That is, of course, an amazing question. And I can tell you that um, my thoughts about performance have changed over my decades. When I was a kid, of course, it was the excitement and being in front of the girls and doing something that not everybody could do. And so making a statement somehow. And, by the time that I was actually doing a lot of blues stuff, I was so passionate about the music, and most of my people that were my age were listening to Led Zeppelin and hard rock stuff, which, I didn't hate that or anything. It wasn't like that. I just thought that blues was the coolest thing. So I was like sort of on a mission then to be playing this music so people my age could kind of hear what I thought was great. But then, a little later, I got interested in classical music, and that became a whole other side of performing for me, in which, I can't say that uh, I still was trying to share what I thought was incredible music, But performing classical guitar music is a beast unto itself. And I did that exclusively for 9 years. But at that point in my life, I was extremely nervous performer. I was uncomfortable, which was unusual because doing other music, I seemed to be more comfortable. Although I always had a little bit of stage fright. Um, but that stage fright was incredible at the time period where I was doing classical guitar stuff. I worked through it, and unfortunately, I was also suffering from alcoholism at that time. So I also, believe it or not, drank my way into not being nervous, which is a really weird thing to admit. Especially now, I've been sober since 1991, not asking for any sort of recognition, but that I had to save my life. I knew I was dying. But I used alcohol to sort of calm the nerves. That's not extremely rare in classical music, but it's dangerous because classical music requires as much perfection as you can get. And so, anyway, that's how I would cover up my nerves. And then, my progression back here to the West Coast, my classical stuff was all when I was living in Boston after high school for 15 years in and around Boston. Anyway, when I moved back to the West Coast is when I sort of got connected again with Terry Robb, and then eventually started to meet Curtis and Lloyd and Paul DeLand, all the guys that I had known earlier. And at that point, I was still a somewhat nervous performer. But after doing, I don't know how many performances, the nerves start to go away. You start to gain that thing that's impossible really to define, the word confidence. But you gain confidence, and of course, getting old helps too. Um, but, and here's back to your original question, the thing that I feel now as a performer is, once again, the sharing, uh, but it's a sort of different angle to the sharing. On my Facebook page, I constantly am saying the same things about sharing, but it's the sharing between the audience and what we musicians on stage are doing. Like, to me, really, truly, that's what music is all about, that connection between all of us. And so, even though, of course, I care about my technique and I want to play as well as I can, I was fixated on that during my classical time period. That's very standard. Um, Now, what I want to do is I want to connect with the audience. And Curtis and I have had countless discussions about this. It's his passion too. And so that's what really drives me at this point.
And one of the things that too that I want that I ask musicians that come on this podcast is about the audience piece of it. So as an artist, as you're looking out in the crowd, what are some of the things that you're looking for
Wow.
that lets you know that the audience is getting into what you're putting out
Oh
there?
man, really good question. And again, it's something that I pay incredibly close attention to. And again, it's something that Curtis and I have talked about. When Curtis and I started playing together, we had a regular gig, and I think it was every Wednesday over at the Cascade Tavern in eastern part of Vancouver. And so we would be playing, and at the end of the first set, the place was always packed because Curtis is so incredibly well known and loved. And so that was great for me because suddenly I'm playing in front of, big audiences all the time. And feeling that incredible thing that comes from an audience that's really into what the musicians are doing. Um, and Curtis and I would often, at the end of the first set, we would say to each other, and sometimes even before, in between tunes, I would lean over and say, I started to see toes moving and people, their body actually moving to the music, not like, they're trying to look cool. They were naturally just responding to what we were playing, and we would go, "We got him." And it wasn't an arrogant thing at all, but it was like, if you can see that your audience is physically connecting or attached to what you are playing, man, I mean, that's what it's about. There's the thing about what groove is all about, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
And one of the things that I've always like been fascinated with, and one of the things from the Curtis show that I saw that you two played, uh, how do you how do you structure the songs with just two guitars?
One
When
guitar.
you nor yeah, one guitar, when the normal arrangement is like a guitar and a bass player and a drum, like, how
Yeah.
do you scale back that
Yeah.
to where it's like just one guitar?
Yeah. Yeah, another great question. Yeah. For me, the whole duo thing, um, first off, playing with my right hand fingers without a pick, right? That's the way I've played for decades and decades. So that way, if you have the skill, you can keep a bass line going separate from what you're doing on top. So your fingers are providing part or all of the chord. And then, depending on your ability, you can hint at, counter melodies, in this case, to what Curtis is singing or playing on his harmonica. So, yeah, the basic goal is to try to play as full as you can. So I'm constantly thinking of, where's the bass line going? Obviously, where are the chords? What can I do? Curtis is now singing this phrase. I don't want to cover him up. Oh, there's a gap. Hey, I could fill that. Or, as you sort of alluded to a little while ago, do I want to fill up that gap? Or I just want to play the groove and keep it solid so there's things are breathing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I also appreciate how you embrace the silence in places. Like a lot of guitarists, sometimes you'll see that they're wanting to sort of fill every space,
Yep.
but the guitarists that have the level of control that you have, that knows those times, like, no, this needs some silence in between these notes.
Well, again, that's a nice compliment. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's common for musicians of all kinds, instrumentalists, to try to fill every gap possible. And of course, that annoys the crud out of singers. And believe me, I've been scolded by singers, and yes, Curtis included. Um, you know, it's hard to not always want to be saying something, whereas and so it's interesting you say silence. Uh, you're never really silent until the song's over, but you don't always have to be interjecting something else in the sense of melody or some sort of flashy thing at all. You have to try to serve the song. What's the song talking about? What's the feel of it? So it's a skill for sure, and you could say it's an art also. Yeah.
And one of the things that has always been fascinating in terms of music in general is the muse aspect of it, because I really do believe the muse is a living, breathing thing.
Interesting.
So when the muse visits you, how do you capture that?
Yeah.
Do you keep a recording device? Do you write like how do you capture the muse when she visits you?
Yeah, and again, that's great. I don't think you can capture it. You write it, or you join in with her, or however you want to phrase it when you feel it. And she is elusive, and this is not just what I think. I mean, every really good musician I've known has talked about that. Like, wow, suddenly I felt like I kind of wasn't thinking the same anymore, and somebody or something was pushing me to another level. And but I don't know what it was. And then suddenly it just sort of went away, and then it came back. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing. I think that I don't think that the muse is an actual entity, but I know what you mean. Um, there are times when it seems that when you are, especially when you're communicating in connection with the audience, that you start to feel as if you are there in that moment, but you're almost abstractly outside of that moment, yet it's still all happening. And that's a very odd sensation, and odd in a positive way. Yeah, but I wish I could be in control of it 100% of the time, but that is not the case.
Yeah, and I want people to hear that, right? Because
Yeah,
like sometimes like if you're not prepared to receive, and I agree with you, it's not like an entity, but it's one of those things you never know
yeah,
when she's gonna rear her little head and
yeah,
go, here's a song.
yeah. Yeah, and musicians have written and talked about that literally for millennia. I mean, this is not something new, especially with younger musicians and students of mine. When we're young, we think that, wow, I'm the first one to understand this or to have no. These are things that musicians have talked about, regardless of style or type of music that they're playing, that they have talked and felt and talked about for a long time. And I don't think I've never met a musician who's told me that they understand it and they are in control of it. I think good musicians, attentive musicians are aware of it, but it's as much of a mystery today as it was 1,000 years ago.
Yeah. And then in terms of like the venue piece, right? One of the things I love asking artists too is from a musician's perspective, what would one thing that a venue could do to make your musical performance a little bit better?
Yeah. Another great question. Yeah. Turn off the television. Yeah. Yeah, those sort of things, I get it. And I like some sports also, so I understand that, but um I'm not a big believer in things that distract the audience from trying to make that connection. And so video screens, I don't even really like it when the video screens are of the musicians playing. You see a giant projection of Mick Jagger and Keith Richards, and they're 80 feet tall on the screen. I even think I get it because they're playing to enormous audiences, but I even think that's kind of odd. Um, Weird lights are not good. Um, what else? Well, it's nice when a venue feels like people are actually listening. So it doesn't bother me when I see people having conversation at their table. Um, but it's always nice if somebody's being too loud at a table, if you sense that the owner or the staff is going to say, hey, could you take that outside and let the musicians do what they're doing? Um, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question
Oh,
very well or not.
100% it does. Because, like, one of the things I try to convey to venues that it is a mutually beneficial relationship. And if they viewed the musical space as if you make the musical space better, it will make the musicians better.
Yeah.
And then it will also make the audience enjoy it more. And so it's one of those random weird things where it's a win win win.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I step into a lot of venues even
Mm-hmm.
today and they have the speakers facing the microphones, they have like glass on the windows that aren't like, so they have like these things that just mess with the acoustics
Mm-hmm.
that are just doing themselves harm.
Yep.
And it's like, if you could just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having great sound systems, of course, that's with every musician, especially when you're traveling, it's like one of your fears is, uh-oh, what's this place going to be like if you haven't played there before? Are they going to have a decent PA? Do they have lights? What's going to be behind us? And like there's all sorts of stuff. How's things that most people don't think about. How's the wiring in the place? Because if the lights and the refrigerators and the everything's on the same power, then you're going to have a horrendous buzz coming from everything on stage. And it's like you could fix these things and make it all that more powerful of a statement, and I agree with you 100%. Like, let's help each other out here.
Yeah.
Let's yeah.
Because, like, it's not like musicians don't rely on venues and venues don't rely on musicians. And so I'm always surprised when I see those sort of almost adversarial
Yeah.
relationships
Yeah.
where venues are like really sort of like it's just like it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and man, it's a killjoy for the musicians.
Yeah.
Like if you sense that, it's like, wow, man, I mean, do are we really going to do this? And how hard is it going to be for us now to forget what blankety blanks the staff or the owner is, and now we're trying to connect with the audience, and yeah, so it makes things tougher. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in terms of like the live performance piece too, like how much do you pay attention to volume as a musician?
Not enough or too much, I guess would be, yeah. I mean, I don't want to say anything disparaging towards anybody in particular, but, playing with Curtis, even the duo, our on-stage volume is loud. Curtis and I are both elderly at this point, and we've both lost hearing for sure. And so our monitors that are facing us are insanely loud. And I like to have my guitar from my amp even in the monitor, so I like it coming at me both directions. So it's not quiet. But in all honesty, the music that we're playing, rhythm and blues, it has something to do with not volume, but being able to feel it. It's gotta hit you in the gut. So if you're playing with no oomph at all, if you're not making the amp work, right? And if you're not pushing a little bit, it's losing a little bit of its. I have a cramp here suddenly. Uh, yeah, hold on a second.
No problem. Mhm.
You might want to edit that.
You got it. Mhm.
I'm also a runner and I ran 6 miles today, so
That's awesome.
I think I'm okay. Sorry.
No worries.
I'll go back to where I was. Yeah, we probably, I would say, and when I've been with Curtis's band for a decade, and we are loud on stage too, and probably too loud. But again, it's that thing of wanting to make the music feel right, and maybe getting carried away a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell, and of course, if the stage volume is really loud, makes it way more difficult for the sound man to try to balance things out, and we get scolded over that from Curtis, the sound man, for sure would scold us. And you can really, when you feel the audience or you see them wincing, and it's like, okay, we're a little bit loud. But what's weird is if you then dial it down, you can kind of feel the energy, not just the volume energy, but you can feel the energy in the room drop. So it's like, I want to get back to it's a funny thing, yeah.
And then sometimes a little bit hard to pick up too once you get through to lose that energy.
Yeah, that is a real torture. Yeah, when for whatever reason, and it can be almost anything. Yeah, when you sense as a performer, when you sense that connection, it's like your internet connection. You're like, wait a minute, what's going on? And this might sound pretentious, but I certainly don't mean it that way. I'm really conscious of what the audience is feeling. Like I love to ride that. That's that dialogue that's occurring, and when it starts to get, you know, when it's lessened in any way or challenged somehow, yeah, it really impacts the performance, and so you got to try to figure out what you can do to get that connection back. Yeah.
Yeah. And then in terms of like the performance piece and sort of like uh as sorry, autism, sometimes words are hard. Um as a professional musician, How important is it to get along with your fellow musicians before, during, and after stage performance?
Yeah, man, another great question. It's hugely important and it's problematic. Because, I think all of us who've been playing for a while and played with all sorts of different people over decades would say something similar. You're not always best friends with the people that you're in a band with. And personalities can clash when you're on the road, traveling from place to place, flying from here to there, getting picked up in a bus to take you to the festival or whatever. You know, uh, People react differently. One individual is totally calm, while somebody like me might not be so calm and might be vocal about what the hell's going on. So yeah, you have to learn to um, try to think, what am I here for? Oh yeah, I'm here to play the best I can and to make for a good performance. So you try to reel in as much of your own demands or preferences as much as you can. On the other hand, though, I'll speak of, my recent or my past decade with Curtis and the band. I've gotten along with everybody who's been in the band, and I feel like I've had a great relationship with them, although they might not agree, um, but I'll let them tell you. But yeah, you want things to be comfortable, obviously on stage, and but it's nice when you're in the green room before you play, or at sound check or whatever. You want to have some sort of camaraderie with somebody, because it can make the music all that much better. Yeah.
And then in terms of like the that piece of like the recording piece, uh, so actually, let me ask this question first. Um, when you're on stage, do you pretty much stick to a set list, or do you sort of like feed off the audience and like like change a direction if things are vibing a certain way?
Yeah, in the duo with Curtis, and when I'm out doing my duo thing, like with Alan Markel or Albert Reed or people that I play with, where I'm sort of the focal point, um, uh, it's going with what feels right because you're so intimately connected with the audience, just two people, or even in like a trio setting, it's really easy to feel like, okay, what's going to work now? Or, yeah, what's going to make this work? In a band setting, more often you have at least a set list as a guideline. But like, with Curtis, for sure, we always had our set list on stage, and typically we'd play the first 5 songs or so on the list. And we always tried to segue from one tune into the next so there was no dead air or as little dead air as possible. But then it's always cool to, if Curtis or, a couple, I remember more than one time where I've said like, hey, could we do this instead? Or Curtis would say, bag the next tune and just call out a tune, even one that might not be on the set list because of what he's feeling from the audience. Yeah.
And that's what I love about blues in general, because like you can catch you and Curtis on stage 2 nights in a row, and it's not going to be the same
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
It's going to be its own special thing every time.
Yeah.
Is that
That's,
something you all commit to?
uh, it's funny. It happened, and it happens 100% naturally. I tell people this, and it's an honest statement. Um, when Curtis and I first started playing in the duo, we never rehearsed. Literal, we never.
What?
We got up, and it was like, "What do you want to play?" And Curtis would say, "Hey, do you know such and such?" And I would go, "Yeah," and we would literally go into it. Now, I will tell you, with originals, of course, you got to learn the tune and blah, blah, blah. Um, but yeah, in when I'm doing my own thing or playing with Curtis or anybody really, you don't really want to try to play the material the same way every night. It's nice to have things be flexible and alive and open to the muse, as you were saying. But there's got to be like some sort of overall form understanding that everybody's in agreement with, especially, the more people in your band. Obviously, you can't have 10 people guessing what's coming next. So you have to have some sort of guidelines.
And I like the opportunity in the duos for that sort of like moments where you share like pieces of the song or like some of the reasons behind.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
is that something you sort of picked up along the way or?
Yeah. Once again, man, your questions are great, and the answer is yeah. And again with Curtis, but even prior to my time with Curtis, um, I think it's really good to, once again, in trying to make that connection with the audience. And it's funny, you see me, I'm looking out at the tables that are empty here. Yeah. You want to help them understand. So you can tell them a little bit about the song, or you can tell them a little bit about the song's composer. Oh, and I think I mentioned to you today is Sunhouse's birthday,
Yeah.
and it's also J.S. Bach's birthday. So those are my two biggest heroes ever. And so, like if I was playing a Sunhouse song, I might tell the audience where when I first heard this song, or I might tell them some ridiculous goofball story about driving in the Delta and going and seeing the water tower that said Drew, Mississippi, and saying pull over, because that's where Sunhouse used to hang out. Um, it makes them go, huh? Or tell them about the time that I called Son House on his birthday when I was 17. And that's a true story. If you don't believe me, you can ask Kerry Robb, because he was on the other phone. But I'm the one that did the talking. Yeah, so if you can do those little, somewhat goofy things to, once again, make the connection with the audience, makes them go, wow. And then I think they also feel and see, because I'm such a weird dude, they see my enthusiasm, they feel it, and they're like, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah. The music doesn't seem esoteric.
Yeah. And that it builds that level of connection
Hmm.
too. And I'm curious if looking back over the years, do you have a performance that stands out in your mind where like you completed that performance and you're like, wow, this just happened?
Yeah, this will sound like I'm being evasive. I think I have hundreds of those. Um, I don't know if I can honestly say thousands. Um, But if you ask me for one in particular, I don't know if I could single one out. There are places that, venues where it seems like something proto-mystical, proto-magical happens. For instance, the Triple Door in Seattle is just this amazing place to play. And uh, I can say that the shows that I've done there have always had a great vibe, and it's that thing, once again, about that where I felt most connected with everybody, guys in the band, with Curtis or whoever I'm playing with, and with the audience. So yeah, I can't give you a specific one, but there've been a lot of them, a lot. Not every one, though, to be honest.
And then in terms of like, if you're looking over your body of work, is there like one album that stands out as to like this one it represents me as an artist?
Yeah, of course, I'd like to say all of them. I think the Curtis and I did, the duo recording, is a really strong statement of what I'm about, sort of at this point. Um, but that duo one is always with Curtis as the focal point. I'm in support. Man, I totally get that. Even though on that recording, the last tune is the song I wrote about my father. It's a total solo tune. slide guitar thing. But and I sing one tune on that recording. Um, but I have other recordings that I've done with other people, and I feel, differently about them, but they have more, they're more, they represent other things that I play. With Curtis, it's very much the bluesy side of things. Yeah.
And I like that you have the freedom to sort of circle back for whatever, and like do your own thing as well.
Yeah, me too. I feel very fortunate in that. Yeah, I listen to so many different types of music, and I love to play it. I've never considered myself a jazz guy. I would feel like I was being very pretentious, but I love playing over complicated chord changes, and I love the challenge of that. And yeah, so I like to perform uh, all sorts of different things, and I think again that helps with an audience because it
Yeah.
breaks it up a little bit. Because some people are, you get total blues nerds, and what they want to hear is 20 songs of 12-bar blues, which are totally cool. And if you play different styles and different grooves or whatever, you could do that. But other people are open to other things, and I think it keeps things a little more fresh. Yeah.
And I've always been fascinated with guitarists that can do the really technical chord progressions in different time signatures. How do you keep straight as you're playing? Like, if you have some obscure time signature, like, how do you not go off time?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, at this point, time signatures now are almost always 4/4 in the stuff I'm doing. So that part of it is not so much of a concern. Although I will tell you that during my classical days, I did a performance. Actually, I think it was 4 or 5 different performances with the Boston Opera Company, and they were doing a opera called Die Soldaten, the Soldiers, by a composer Zimmermann, who is a German composer, and literally. This was this piece of music. It was about an hour long opera, and the guitar part, a very long guitar part. Like my guitar part was like 70 pages.
Whoa.
And almost every measure was a separate, different time signature. Literally, you'd go from 4/4 to 7/8 to 9/16 to 2/4. And the most bizarre part was when I got to the first rehearsal, I the harp player, right, who was sitting next to me. I knew her. This is somebody that I'd already performed with. The Boston Opera Company at that time didn't have a set orchestra, but it was all the best freelancers in Boston. So I knew most of the people in this orchestra. And so we're at our first rehearsal, and I look over at the harp player and I say, "Hey, can I look at your part?" And she's like, "Yeah." And so I open up her part, and I'm looking at her first measure, and it says 7/8. And I'm looking at mine, and it says 4/4 or 5/4 or something. And I'm like, how in the world can this be? So everybody's part was in a different time signature. And the conductor then would have to decide, what time signature am I going to beat for the orchestra? And then you'd have to know that whatever, and this was Sarah Caldwell was the conductor at that time. I don't even know if she's alive anymore. Point is, whatever she decided to conduct, you had to be able to go, okay, she's conducting 5, but my part's in 7. And if she's in 5/4, yeah, so it was complicated. And I used to tell people that I would walk from those rehearsals, and I couldn't walk a straight line, not because I was drinking, but because I was like being 3/4 and then in 7/8. And I was like, it drove me crazy. But so trying to, chord things, staying on top of the chord progressions, that's the other side. Um, that's just an endless fascination. And it simply comes down to being able, of course, to memorize and then to think as far ahead of where you are musically at any moment. In other words, to be remembering sounds weird, but to be remembering what's coming, right? Okay, yeah, and then we're going to go here, and this chord change is going to take me here, and then as an improviser, what am I going to do with that? Yeah.
And
It's a challenge. All of those things are wonderful, endless challenges.
do you think that helped you though? Like, so like as that time in classical music, I would imagine that had a profound impact on your ability to play once you transitioned back to the blues.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. I tell people, and I've told several people this in interviews and things, and had some funny responses. But when I talk about Son House and J.S. Bach, I literally say I think of myself as a musician who's trying his best to combine that pathos, that drive, that energy of Son House, the Delta guys, with the precision and with the intricacies of what J.S. Bach was all about. And I absolutely believe that they are capable of being combined. So that's constantly what's going through my head. So I would say, yeah, I'm a combination of 18th century counterpoint and Delta blues.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. And so if you're thinking about musicians that are just starting out, right? Because uh, it's one of those things where if you want to be a musician, you have to have the passion and work first. It's nothing that comes easy. But what advice would you give to people who are just starting in music that would help make sure that the next generation doesn't quit, if you will?
Wow. Really good again. Yes. Several things. First off, you really need to listen to that inner voice that's talking to you, and try to not dismiss what your mom and dad might be saying, or your peers about what you're doing, but to really try to listen to, what do I feel about this? What am I trying to do with my music? Um, it's easy to give up, and it's easy to be frustrated, and it's easy to give in to what other people might be saying. But, I'm not a person that believes in the word talent. Like I always, I've been teaching since 1980. That's what I do during the day. And, I've had many, many parents come to me and say, does my kid have any talent at all? And I get really uncomfortable. I, s- I believe that it's not talent. It's the ability to focus. And for some reason, I've always had the ability to sit in a room and focus and drop the needle and practice guitar, and it didn't seem like any sort of it was pleasurable to me. So if a young musician can find that, um, dig in, and then, back to the real substance of your question, always try to find people you can make music with, especially those that are at least as good as you, if not better, and maybe far better. If they can tolerate you, it'll be nothing but a positive for you. Yeah.
And then in terms of like the instrument itself, does it really matter what instrument you begin with? Or do you recommend like do you recommend I always think of it as two things. Do you recommend like going to the guitar shop and picking out a random instrument, or do you think there needs to be some intention behind which instrument you try for?
Yeah, when I was a kid in grade school, it was like, the school band would, they always had a band teacher, and he would check out, how your embouchure was. So you had to be you'd be a great clarinet player, or oh no, you never want to, I think that somebody needs to pick their own instrument of choice, what seems to be calling to them. Although I would admit to you that Um, I consider myself a musician before I consider myself a guitar player. And again, I don't think it's pretentious because if for some reason I hadn't chosen the guitar, um, when I was a kid, I would sit down at a piano and I was equally enthralled. And, and even for a while I had a violin, so I would noodle on that. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't think that any one instrument is necessarily what anybody needs to do. I think you need to focus on an instrument at some point for some particular amount of time, but I think you should always try to remain open to music in general, not a specific instrument.
So we've been at this for almost an hour. What would you like people to? No, best the question is, where can people go to find your music?
Oh man, well, I'm sort of everywhere these days. So Uh, I don't have a website, although I did have a website for quite a while, but I let it go. Actually, I let it go when I started performing with Curtis a lot, simply because he had, promo people that were doing everything. So at this point, I'm basically using Facebook to let people know where I am. But I do plan on getting my website back up and running. And I'm also recording my own material now. I've just started. So my plan is once I get my website up and running, and I hope that's in the next couple months, I want to put up a new composition, a new song every month. That's my challenge to myself. So, because nobody puts out CDs anymore because it's sort of a lost thing. It's sad, you know.
Yeah,
But
it really is. And then the last question that will round out the conversation is, why is it important for the community to embrace and support local music?
yeah, yeah. Well, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, or maybe we didn't even say this per se, but as far as I'm concerned, I love recorded music. And as I alluded to earlier, I mean, I listen to music constantly still, and but I believe live music is what music's all about, and I think that really goes back tens of thousands of years to people living in caves and people hanging in fields where this was what you did at night. You would sing, or you would beat on something, or you'd play a primitive flute and you'd sing. um, so live music to me is really what it's about. And if Portland's interesting because there are venues where musicians can get out and play. And Portland is struggling in ways like every other place is these days to keep venues open. But I hope that audiences continue to be interested, because it keeps we musicians employed, but it helps keep the music moving forward.
Yeah, because if just the idea or thought of a world without music terrifies me.
Yeah,
Like I can't even want to imagine a world without
yeah,
music.
yeah. Well, again, I agree 100%. I know for a fact, and I hate saying things like this in a way because it sounds weird, but I definitely wouldn't be here if it weren't for music. I know that as crazy as people might think I am, I'm a lot crazier without it. It has completely directed my life and ruled my life, and yeah.
Well, Alan, thank you so much. And I'll end the podcast the way I always end the podcast. Folks, be kind. We live on the same planet. We breathe the same air, and this world would just be a little bit better if we treated everybody with a little kindness and respect.
Agreed, 100%. My pleasure.